Councilman Benson. Councilwoman Carson.
Present.
Councilman Teeter.
Here.
Councilman McEldowney.
Here.
Councilwoman Elliott.
Present.
Councilman Douglas.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Please let the record reflect that the only one not here this evening is Councilman Andrew Amador. For the moment of silence this evening, we're going to do the moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. But for the moment of silence, I would like to ask everybody to keep in their prayers. Lifetime resident John Walsh passed away last week, and that is Councilman Teeter's brother-in-law. So our prayers go out to him and his family, and the families of those that were injured or killed in today's bombing at the Boston Marathon. Apparently, last I heard, there was 2 dead for sure, and then over 100 injured. And then for Councilman Andrew Amador is at the hospital with his wife, and we hope everything's okay there. So please stand and join me for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, before we get any further, I would like to ask the council if they would consider excusing Mr. Amador for his absence this evening. Mr. Benson?
Move to excuse Mr. Amador's absence this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Teeter?
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to excuse Mr. Amador for missing this evening's meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That motion is carried. Now we'll ask the audience to introduce themselves. Welcome, and thank you for all being here.
Pam Spratler.
Eddie Thomas.
Danny Thomas.
Deborah Bullock.
Sandy Carruthers.
Aaron Mooney.
Mike Cheney.
Guillermo Serna.
Joy Bishop.
Gene Leffel, Board of Adjustment, and resident of the Garden Terrace subdivision established in 1922.
I'm Keith Wood with the Colorado State Forest Service.
Tony Hadabiel, Parks and Recreation.
John Howard, Information Technology.
Roger Tinklenberg, Finance.
Larry Woog, Police Department.
Darren Sterling, Public Works.
Walt Williams, Economic Development.
Lauren Martin.
Mary Martin.
Carolyn Keith, Parks and Recreation.
Roy Hayes.
Again, thank you all for being here this evening. We go into proclamations and recognitions first, and I would like to ask if there's anyone here to accept the Victims' Rights Week proclamation. Please come forward to the podium. Mr. Manager, do you know where the proclamations are? I don't have them up here. Laura? Okay. That's all right. We can get started. Mr. Woog, if you just don't mind waiting there for a second. No, just stay right where you're at. I'll have Bob read the proclamation, please.
Office of the Mayor, Commerce City, Colorado, proclamation. Whereas 20 million Americans are victims of crime each year, and crime affects many more, including families, friends, and communities. And whereas crime exacts an emotional, physical, and psychological and financial toll on victims that has the potential to irrevocably change the course of their lives forever. And whereas victim assistance programs across the country are reaching more victims and criminal justice officials are honoring victims' rights more consistently, public understanding of victims' rights remains minimal, and challenges face our nation's victims services system. And whereas Commerce City has a victims services unit staffed by 2 full-time employees and 8 volunteers, all of whom provide on-site incident assistance to crime victims 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas the unit served more than 700 individuals last year, primarily responding to domestic violence or sexual assault on children, with essential items such as diapers, toiletries, teddy bears, blankets, and clothes. And whereas Commerce City is participating in National Crime Victims' Rights Week, helps to raise awareness about the services provided by the unit, as well as recruit volunteers to participate in this important program. Now, therefore, on behalf of the City Council, I hereby proclaim the week of April 21 through 27, 2013, as National Crime Victims' Rights Week, reaffirming the city's commitment to respect victims' rights and address their needs throughout the year.
Thank you. What are the council's desires? Mr. McEldowney?
I would move to approve the proclamation declaring April 21 through 27, 2013 as Victims' Rights Week.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock?
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion is approved. City Clerk, do we have the proclamations?
No, we do not.
We do not. Okay. I still want to come down and congratulate Mr. Woog. If the council will join me down front, and we will
Mr.
make
Mayor?
sure you get a copy of the proclamation. Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Mayor, another suggestion might be to locate the proclamations and do a photo later in the meeting. I think Commander Woog plans to be here for the rest of the meeting.
That's fine. I still want to come down and congratulate him. While everybody else is here, so that they know I treat him the same as I do anybody else. Let's just kind of mood I'm in tonight, right? We will once they find the proclamation. We have another proclamation before us this evening, and I'm sure the case is probably the same on the actual proclamation.
I'm sorry?
The actual proclamation for the Arbor Day?
I do not have that either.
Perfect. So we're going to take the same course of action. Would Mr. Jaramillo please come forward? And you can bring along the state forester. Will the attorney please read the proclamation?
Office of the Mayor, Commerce City, Colorado, proclamation. Whereas the City of Commerce City desires to recognize and observe Arbor Day along with others across the nation and throughout the world. And whereas the City of Commerce City has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation for the 22nd consecutive year. And whereas the City Council and staff wish to promote an interest in the planting of trees in residential areas as well as city-owned parks, trails, and open space. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. Now therefore, be it resolved that I, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim that April 19, 2013 is known as Arbor Day in Commerce City, recognized with several activities such as providing tree seedlings to the community and promoting the Sand Creek Regional Greenways Race for Open Space event. Be it further resolved that council urges all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees, woodlands, and support the city's community forestry program.
Thank you. I'm open for a motion. Mr. McEldowney?
I'd move to approve the Arbor Day proclamation and Tree City USA recognition.
Thank you. Mr. Teeter?
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. Mr. Jaramillo, do you or the forester have anything you'd like to add before we come down and congratulate you?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Tonight, we're also here for the Tree City USA designation. Commerce City, again, as Bob mentioned, has been recognized by the National Arbor Day Foundation for the 22nd consecutive year. This is a testament to the city's promotion and interest in planting of trees in residential areas, as well as city-owned parks, trails, and open space. This week, we're going to be celebrating Arbor Day. Park and Recreation Department staff will be handing out seedlings, educational tree care tip sheet. We do have some seedlings on the back table here this evening for everybody to take and enjoy and celebrate Arbor Day with us. We're also giving tree seedlings to the children in the kinder class on Thursday, April 18th, and educating the students about trees as well. And we're also promoting the Sand Creek Regional Greenway Race for Open Space Run. With that, I'd like to introduce Keith Woods with the Colorado State Forest Service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Mayor and councilors, for the time on the agenda tonight to present the 22nd Tree City Award to the City of Commerce City. Proud to be here to do that tonight. There are 4 standards that need to be met each year. The City of Commerce City has to send in an application to the State Forest Service showing they met these 4 standards each year. We then forward the applications on to the Arbor Day Foundation in Nebraska, who puts their stamp of approval on it and then send us the recognition materials that we hand out in the following year. So this recognition is for all the work that was done in 2012. And the first standard we look for is a professional tree care manager in the community, and Mr. Jaramillo provides that service. The second thing we look for is the tree ordinance is in place and enforceable. The third thing is a community forestry program with $2 per capita, and then the Arbor Day observance, such as Tony mentioned, and the proclamation that was read tonight is that 4th standard we look for. So congratulate the city on the award. Wanted to mention a couple accomplishments that Tony and his staff completed last year. The tree replacement program replaced 64 trees throughout city parks and on building grounds. So they planted a lot of trees and replaced a lot of trees through that program. And also the park maintenance operations staff planted 15 trees in various parks as well. So a little bit of in-house work there. And something, too, I thought I would mention tonight real briefly here is there's a study that has recently been conducted. The results are just out now. There will be more information coming in some formal stuff that are going out to the 29 communities in the Denver metro area that participated in this study, Commerce City being one of them. But it was a urban tree canopy study conducted by the U.S. Forest Service's Pacific Southwest Research Station. It's funded by the Mile High Million Tree Planting Initiative. And some of the results there are pretty interesting. The Commerce City Urban Forest produces ecosystem services valued at nearly $7 million annually. So those trees out there are working hard, providing those benefits. The largest of those benefits, which is $5.4 million worth, is for property value increases throughout the city. There's 1,029 acres of existing tree canopy in the city of Commerce City. The second largest benefit of that tree canopy, which is valued at about $1.3 million, is reduced stormwater runoff management costs from about 98,000 gallons of rainfall and snowfall, as we're getting tonight, intercepted by the existing canopy. So they are hard-working trees. One other thing, the air temperature reductions from the cooling where the trees take the water up through the roots and evaporate through the leaves, that's a cooling process, and it's estimated that This reduces residential air conditioning demand by over $178,430 in cooling costs each year. So some interesting results. More information on that will be forthcoming from the Mile High Million Tree Planting Initiative, but I thought I would mention that real quick tonight. And also say congratulations on the Tree City and keep up the good work.
Well, I would like to say thank you to the Forest Service for acknowledging all the, and it's a testimony to the hard work of our Parks and Recreation Department for the care they give our public properties that have trees and shrubs that they take care of. They do an exceptional job, so I want to thank you and your staff, Tony, for everything you guys do for us. And we'll come down and congratulate you on the proclamation and accept the Tree City Award.
Thank you for the support.
All right, Tony, yep. All right, guys. Make sure I get... All right, on three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
at the conclusion of going through your list for citizen communication, we have another person that has come in, Ms. Trudy Smith, that asked to be recognized under citizen communication.
Okay, and I'm just getting ready to talk about the list here because one of the items on our agenda, there are several people signed up to speak on, and since we do have it on our agenda, I will allow public comment to take place during that time. And so for those of you who've signed up to speak on the neighborhood stuff, the neighborhood identification program, I would ask that you be patient. You'll have an opportunity to speak during the resolution.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
The minutes should reflect that Councilman Amador has arrived.
I agree. We'll let the record reflect Mr. Amador is here and ready to participate, right?
Yes.
Everything's good? Good. All right. Good. So I'm going to cross off a few and hold them over until later in the agenda, but you will have an opportunity to speak. So I'm going to go with the, first let me ask, the lady that came in, is she going to speak on neighborhood identification?
I don't know. That was Ms. Trudy Smith.
Ms. Smith, neighborhood identification? Then you'll get a chance when that part of the agenda comes forward. I want to remind everybody that there will be limited to 3 minutes. Please give your name and address when you come up to the podium, and you'll have the opportunity to address the council. I'll first call Deborah Bullock.
Deborah Bullock, 6130 Ivanhoe Street, Commerce City, Colorado.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight on behalf of Commerce City Historical Society. It's time again this year to deliver our coloring books to all of the second graders in School District 14 and in 27J within the Commerce City boundaries. And we're going to do that next Monday, April 22nd, Tuesday morning, the 23rd, and Wednesday, the 22nd, and possibly Friday, the 29th, or Monday, the 29th. I've given you a sheet at your desk. We are in the process of setting up all of the times with all of the schools. And we just want you to be aware. Last year we did this, and we filled the council chambers, remember, with the students with their pictures in the coloring book. And so we're giving you a heads up this year. We want to do that on Monday, May 6th. We will, Monday, May 13th, we'll be here at council giving them their certificates. The Monday before that, we're going to post them all in the city lobby. We're working on getting a time frame with the city manager's office on that through the Cultural Council. And then Friday, May 3rd, we're picking all the pictures up from all the schools. And so we're going to do that again. It was great, a great project last year. And if any of you would like to hand them out, please contact me, and I will give you a time that you can hand the books out. It's a lot of fun. The students get really excited about it, and they ask a lot of questions about the city, so it would be really great to have some city representatives to answer their questions. And so that's one project that we're working on. We're actually picking up our coloring books tomorrow, so I don't have one for you. It's similar to the ones last year, but we did add some pages in it, and so it's a new version, and they'll be coming tomorrow. The next thing I'd like to talk about is our newsletter that you have in front of you. We have added 4 pages, and the 4 pages took up obituaries. So that is going to be very popular. We've been handing the newsletters out in businesses in Derby, and Esther Hall, who all of you know, has told me that she needs more of the newsletters because people want to keep those because of the obituaries. So that's a new thing that we're doing. And then the other thing I want to talk about is our Jean Klein Angel Award Luncheon. That is on May 5th. It's a Sunday, and we would like council representation there. So if you'd like to do a table, we would be grateful if you would do that. This year, we're going to honor Norm and Janet Union, Barbara Jones, and Charlene Jaramillo. And we have also developed a new award this year that's a memorial award to recognize the first responders, like the police department and the fire department. And this year we're going to recognize and honor Harold Hubble Sr. and Richard Watts. They were both killed in the fire department in the line of duty. So we're going to honor those families. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Great. Is there any comments or questions for Ms. Bullock? Councilwoman Carson?
Deborah, I just wanted to thank you for coming tonight. And the coloring book thing, I just think is so wonderful, because I do know even parents get a little brief update on the history through that. So thank you for doing that. And
You're welcome.
last year when the students came, I still to this day say that was the best night any of us ever had in this room, so thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Not only do the students start to learn about the history, but the parents read the coloring book.
They do.
And so they learn also.
Yeah, there was,
so it's a great
there was
thing.
a lot of good comments from that last year, so thank
great.
you. And thank you to the rest of the
You're
Historical
welcome.
Society.
Seeing no one else, thanks, Deb, for
You're
coming in
welcome.
tonight and giving us the update on where we're at with the Historical Society.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I will call Mary Morton.
Mary Morton, Adams County School District 14 Board of Education, 5980 East 61st Avenue here in Commerce City.
Good evening.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Pro Tem Bullock, Mayor Ford. Good to see you all again.
Good to see you.
The reason I'm here this evening is because I just left Adams City High School. Tonight was a kickoff to their arts festival, and they have amazing work over at the high school, and I'd like to urge everybody to go out and take a look and just see what the talent that our community has here in it. And some of the events that are going on this week over at the high school is Little Shop of Horrors theatrical production, Thursday, April 11th and Friday, April 12th at the Adams City High School Theater, and the show starts at 7 p.m. The art show opened today, of course, and and it's at the high school theater in the media center foyer. And from 5 to 7, we had awards. They're given out tonight for amazing artists. So, but I mean, you've got to go down. Everybody's got the community go down and just see some of the things that are going on in our community. On Tuesday, April 16th, tomorrow, we have the Adams City High School Jazz and Mariachi Concert. And on Wednesday, we have culinary night at the Bistro. And then on Thursday, April 18th, at the theater, from 5 to 7, we have the Film Fest. And I tore this poster off one of the windows on my way out this evening, so I was going to see if it would be possible if we could put it somewhere here in City Hall.
I think that's a great idea. Would you please just give it to the attorney right here? We'll make sure that gets up.
Okay.
And go ahead. You still have some more you want to talk about?
No,
I wanted to thank you very much for coming in. It's great that you can give us an update on what's happening over at the high school, because I didn't know those things until now. So you're welcome to come anytime and give us an update, and it helps with the citizens as well, so that they know that there's activities going on over at the high school. And I'll do my best to get by to take a look at the art projects.
Oh, yes,
So,
please do. Please.
Thank you very much for coming in. I want to ask the council if they have any comments or questions for you.
I do.
Councilwoman Carson?
I was just going to urge everybody to go by. I did go by tonight. There is some amazing talent that we have in this city, and it really is. It's amazing when you look at that and you think that it's the students from all ages and stuff. And the support there tonight was wonderful. The snowstorm did not stop anybody from showing
That's right.
up. But so I just wanted to thank everybody who made that possible for our students in the city. So thank you.
Oh, we had a big show.
Council-
We had a big crowd.
Councilwoman Elliott?
Good evening, Mary. Thank you for coming. I am sorry that I didn't get to make it this evening because of the weather. It took me a little while to get here, but I can tell you that I'm really proud of our students. And to understand that scholarships are given out to one of the most elite schools in Colorado. I'm proud to say that my daughter's graduating from there on Friday, so I can appreciate art. It's a talent that's it's incredible. So I'm definitely going to make it a point to get out there. But I wanted to ask you, the concert that you mentioned tomorrow night, the jazz concert and the mariachi concert combined. What time does that begin?
I think it's 5 to 7. I'm not sure. Is that what he said? 5 to 7.
5
yeah.
to 7. Okay, great. I'll make it a point to attend. But
Yeah.
thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
Someone turned the heat up in here. I don't know what's going on. I can hardly stand it, sitting up here. Turn the air conditioner back on. Okay, next I will call Roy Hayes.
Roy Hayes, 6970 Birch Street.
Good evening.
Mayor, council. I was just wondering if there had been any research done on the information that I presented on March 4th for review about amending the weight limit on the ordinance for the potbelly pig yet?
No, that I know of. Mr. Manager, have you looked into it at all yet?
A number of city staff, including the Commerce City Police Department, have been researching ordinances in other communities. We expect to have some research available for City Council shortly.
Okay, and will you please make Mr. Hayes aware of the evening that we're going to be updated?
Certainly.
Great. So we are looking into it, Mr. Hayes. Hopefully, I don't know when your court date is. Hopefully, everything goes okay for you. And I'm not the judge, but we'll see what happens. And if you want to continue to pursue changing that ordinance, we can also look into that once we have the information from our staff.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here this evening. And now I have 3 more on the list, but they're signed up for the neighborhoods, so we will get to that here in just a moment. I didn't forget about you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda this evening. Does any member of this council wish to pull either item off of the consent agenda and move it to a regular agenda item. Mr. Bullock or Mr. McElhenney, I'm assuming you're for a motion? Okay, nobody else? Then I will go ahead and accept the motion. Mr. McElhenney.
Would move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock.
Second that.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Will Mr. Gaylor please read the titles?
Title of Ordinance 1948 reads as follows: An ordinance amending sections 21-5249 and 21-11200 of the Land Development Code of the City of Commerce City for the purpose of regulating the location of medical marijuana businesses and primary caregivers. Title of Resolution 2013-25 reads as follows: Resolution approving and authorizing the execution and delivery of an equipment lease/purchase agreement to refinance certain energy efficiency equipment and systems, authorizing the execution and delivery of documents required in connection therewith, and authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this resolution. That's the consent agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Consent agenda has been read. I have a motion and a second, and I will ask for a roll call vote, please. Mr. Amador is not going to be able to vote because when you called roll, so we're going to have to fix that.
We can fix that in just a moment,
Okay.
please. Would you all go ahead and push your buttons for me, please? Your present buttons.
Okay.
Again. Mr. Benson.
Mr. Amador?
Mr. Benson there? Mr. Benson?
Mr. Benson?
Oh.
Okay.
Let's try that now, please.
Okay. Now everybody can vote. Let the record show that the consent agenda has been approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda, we'll get into resolutions. And we'll start with the one that everybody's here to speak on. And before we do that, I would like to state that I feel, because I am a board member for Community Enterprise and I'm the mayor of Commerce City, I do not want there to be a perceived bias on my side. So I would ask the council to allow me to abstain, and I would ask that that be in the form of a motion. Mr. Bullock?
Move to allow the mayor to abstain from voting. Do you want to abstain from a conversation on it too? Any
Yep.
discussion? Will recluse yourself?
Everything. 2013-03.
Okay. Is this an abstention or recluse?
Being an abstention.
Okay, I'm abstaining from any activity with motion, resolution 2013-03.
Thank you. Mr. Teeter?
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to allow the mayor to abstain from interacting on Resolution 2013-03. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. Now we'll start with Resolution 2013-03. Does City Council have any questions regarding the resolution?
No. Can we move to approve it and then the discussion?
Seeing none, I want to allow all the folks that are here this evening to have a chance to speak before I ask for the motion.
Okay.
So that you can hear what everybody has to say before you make a decision. So now I'm going to go to the audience and allow everybody to come up and speak on this item only, neighborhood identification. And I'm going to start with the three that signed up for this item, and then I'll go to the audience because I know there are more. We'll start with Guillermo Serna. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record.
Guillermo Serna, 14122 East 102nd Place, Commerce City, Colorado.
Good evening.
Good evening, 80022. As we look at neighborhoods and identifying them, I am hoping that City Council and administration takes into heart what people have put into it and not just pass this for boundary lines. We know that there's some neighborhoods that are better off than others and may have special needs and perspective. So when you go for grants, please look at the needs of these neighborhoods independently. Don't just say we're going to go for grants just for the heck of going for grants. Go out there, look at the neighborhoods, get administration to go look at the neighborhoods, talk to that community, because now they will be neighborhoods. And some areas up north and some areas down south are two different neighborhoods entirely. And their difference are different. Their needs are different. So as you look at how this is going to progress, keep it fair in perspective to the grants that are going to be written or asked for because of the city. Don't just do it for the amount of money that it might bring into the city, but for what it can do for the community as a whole, as businesses see it. Up north, yes, we got pathways, but there's kids that need basketball. And we keep asking, is there a possibility? Well, no, we can't quite get it done. Hey, give the kids a basketball court or two so that it can stay within their neighborhoods and mom and dad know where these kids are. They don't have to come down here or they don't have to go across the railroad tracks to get what they need, or pay $20 for every time they go into Reunion. Down here, it's in how we apply for grants to improve housing, as far as yards, as far as sidewalks, as far as anything that has to do with that neighborhood. Not just a plaque or a name, but to know that when somebody comes down here and says, we need help, that you can give them that help. And when you apply for grants, that you take that into consideration. Historical societies. Okay, let's be fair as to which neighborhoods have history and which ones are just beginning. And let's be fair in that representation. And in the future, if these neighborhoods so choose to change some of these neighborhoods' names, that they are given the opportunity to get that done. Because if you don't, you're going to create separatism. And I think what we're trying to do with this is create unity among the city. I know that there's a lot of hard work that has gone into it. I'm a little bit disappointed, but I think that there also has to be room for improvement on anything. But don't just stop by accepting the boundary lines. Go into these neighborhoods. Don't just drive by, but go into these neighborhoods. Talk to the people as to what they need, because this is what hasn't happened in the past. And I'm hoping that as city council people and mayors and mayor pro tems change, that they can read this and make sure that they follow what you may be trying to do. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will call, next one on the list is Aaron Mooney. Questions for Mr. Cerner?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me start with that. Mr. Bullock, did you have one? Jason did. Okay, but your light's on, so I was going to you first. No? Mr. Benson.
Thanks. Mr. Cerny, you said something about neighborhoods up north that were divided in some way.
Yes.
Because it's my understanding that they're divided, those are subdivisions. They have an HOA, that's a logical division for those areas? Are they divided in some other way that?
See, yes. And you're having a problem right now in how these neighborhoods are divided into the wards that are supposed to represent them. My ward right now, I have been in about 3 different wards since I moved up there. And nobody takes into consideration as to where that neighborhood is or the needs of those 600 homes that are there. We feel abandoned. Everybody's in the process of trying to get some parts, okay, but all we get is the ring around. And I know that we're in a growing mode, but this is why you hire administrators, to look at these areas and to make sure that it's not, in a sense, a political part when you're looking at words. You're looking at people and how you can represent them best. Not somebody from the north down south, or not somebody from the south, especially in wards. I know that we have at-large positions, but there's got to be one person that can bring these neighborhoods together. And we're going to change, and we're going to change pretty fast. I realize that. But what I'm saying is, because of this growth, we have to look pretty close as to how our representation comes about on this table right here.
But you're saying it's because of the ward boundaries changing?
Right now, yes.
Separated, right?
Yes, Mr. Benson.
I know you have been in 3 different wards in the last 6 years. I guess it's just because you're kind of right on that edge.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a very, 600 homes is 600 homes. They can fit anywhere up north. You have a lot of business areas that could probably be included in another, especially in between the railroad tracks. But that's just, that's just the need of the neighborhood. Okay? It's gotten...
I just don't know. I know that the people that did the reward drawing, I thought they have a difficult task trying to comply with all the state laws.
Nobody says government is easy.
And you said something about don't do what will make the city money, do what's good for the city and the kids. How would this recognizing neighborhoods make money for the city? I didn't know that was the purpose of it.
You want to make money, okay? How do you make money? You bring in businesses. You have a whole community that agrees with the city that education is part of it. That's how you unite people. You have people that can live up north, okay, and accept the needs of the south, or the people in the south can accept the needs of the north because of children, because of senior citizens, because of driving these people to and from hospitals or whatever they need. Mayor, I think that you know yourself that's one of the comments before you took over this office. One of the things that you hadn't met was the need of senior citizens as far as getting to their doctors or hospitals or whatever. And don't take so long. If this is going to get done, then get it done. Let those people participate with you so that they can work with you as far as to what they need. It's not just saying we're going to change the boundaries. It's, okay, here's some funds for Foxton neighborhood. You can spend it any which way that you want. How do you want to spend this allocation for this neighborhood? Let the people decide. There's been some in-services that people have gone to that I think can get this accomplished. But give yourself some committees into the neighborhoods. That's why wards are there, so that you can represent those people. And it's got nothing to do with politics. It's just being there for them. And I think that businesses will see that, and they will come here. and they will pay taxes, and kids will graduate. Things are being done right now for Commerce City that not too many other cities are doing. And that's because you're in a growing trend. And I thank you for hearing me.
Mr. McEldowney.
I appreciate your comments as always, sir. I just want to make sure that we're hearing comments on the subject that's on the agenda tonight. We have neighborhood boundaries, which is really an effort to bring identification to our neighborhoods. That's a separate and distinct discussion completely from ward boundaries, just to be clear.
I am clear. Okay. Mr. Benson brought it up. I'm just responding to his question.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard comments about this in context of the ward discussions. The other piece that I just want to make clear, and I don't know if you were at the study session at the point that we talked about this last week.
I was.
In terms of, well, hear my point first, that in terms of the grants, you made a comment at the beginning of your remarks about if and as the city pursues grants that we need to keep in mind, and you named several factors. The key to this neighborhood identification project, as outlined in the presentation last week, and I think it would be helpful if staff present that tonight because we've kind of jumped into comments before folks who weren't present in the study session had the benefit of seeing that. The key is this neighborhood identification puts not only a name and a boundary on a map to help neighborhoods have some sense of where they begin and end as part of a city. It puts together behind it the support of both city staff and community enterprise to help people within that neighborhood self-pursue objectives for their community. So if somebody in one of the identified neighborhoods decides to step up and become their neighborhood advocate, this process, the process put forth in this presentation that I hope we go through, gives them the structure to help get the help that they need. So be that securing a grant. So it's not about us identifying grant needs for an individual neighborhood. It's about giving a vehicle for the individual neighborhoods to help do for themselves, in addition to what we're going to try and do on a citywide basis. Does that help? I mean,
I clearly understand what this is all
I didn't
about.
sense that from your comments, and I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We are.
Thank you, Mr. Cerna.
Thank you.
Next, I will call, and before I call anybody, I just wanted to let the council know, when I asked if the council has any questions regarding the resolution, there wasn't a presentation portion unless the council had requested to have more information given at the council meeting. So that's why there wasn't a presentation, and it went right into the audience for comment. I will now call Aaron Mooney. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Erin Mooney. I'm the brand new Executive Director of Community Enterprise. I don't live in Commerce City. I work at 7290 Magnolia Street. Do you want my other address?
No, I wanted to hear yet after you said I don't live in Commerce City.
Yet, exactly.
That makes it better.
I am really, really excited to be a part of Commerce City and to bring my passion for working with the community here to this new community for me. I've been on the ground for 6 weeks and have been so impressed with the collaboration going on in this community. I've been so proud to step into this role and see all the work that my staff and colleagues have done on the neighborhood identification project. It's really exciting. I know that you guys know I'm singing to the choir. This is a movement that's gone on all over the world. The process of naming communities is a process that has been undertaken, as I said, all over the world because it invigorates communities. It adds to revitalization. It develops ownership, residents feeling ownership of where they live and the ability to then connect to government, to other organizations, and to really affect change. So you guys know what's going on. The community knows what's going on. I'm really proud of the process as it unfolded before I arrived. Almost 1,000 surveys where we were on the ground with residents asking, is this important to you? What do you call your neighborhood? And I see this as an ongoing process. I see every map as a living document. As residents say, hey, this name isn't how we see it now. maps constantly change, and we have the opportunity to do that here, which I think is a beautiful opportunity as residents really get involved. And of course, every neighborhood will always be a part of Commerce City, and we just have the opportunity for someone who lives in a neighborhood with a school or a park who really has buy-in into that school or park to talk to their neighbors and residents, whereas someone that maybe lives 5 miles away and would have buy-in to a different neighborhood. It just really gives us opportunity for ownership. And I look forward in my new role to being able to support residents, support the city as Commerce City continues to flourish and develop. So thanks.
Let me see if there are any questions or comments for you before you go on. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Ms. Mooney? Yeah, that's why I have to ask, because I don't know.
Thank you. Ms. Mooney, thank you very much. We're excited to have you on board. Obviously, excited about your passion for the role, and it's an exciting time. As Mr. Cerna talked about, there's a lot going on in Commerce City. There's a lot that's been done. For folks that have been on the ground, I think it's more evident than folks that haven't, and you obviously are in a unique position to come into a role with a lot of folks who are helping make that change happen, and look forward to seeing your impact on that.
Me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will call Sandy Carruthers.
I'm Sandy Carruthers. I live at 6951 Kearney Street, Commerce City, Colorado, in the core southern portion of the city. And good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here to speak tonight in support of the Neighborhood Boundary Identification Initiative. I speak primarily as from the perspective of a resident who lives in the core city, because that's where I live. That's where my home is. But I'm very happy that the city staff and the process has added the commercial areas and also the organized northern tier parts of our community to the map. For whatever reasons, whether societal or generational, we've lost touch with the very people who live right outside of our houses, right outside our own doors. And in this electronic age, with social media, we have all sorts of new forms of connectivity, and they're good. But you can call me old-fashioned. I still believe in the real-time, face-to-face, person-to-person connectivity, and I think that's one of the most important ways to connect and have unity and involvement in our communities. That's why I'm so excited about NBI. I believe in resident engagement, and believe me, if I didn't, I wouldn't have been here tonight with conditions outside. And NBI does provide the framework for recognized neighborhood groups to form. I see only potential, opportunity, and benefits in this process. Those include increased communication, getting a voice, and that starts out first, person to person, with your very own neighbors in your own neighborhoods, and then communication with other neighborhoods in our city. It sets up the opportunity for two-way communication with the city elected officials and other groups in our city. It allows us as residents to give input into policies and programs. It gives us an opportunity as residents to identify and prioritize the very needs and issues that are central to our own neighborhood. It gives us an opportunity to seek neighborhood-based solutions to our issues and problems. We don't need to wait for government or someone else to necessarily to solve our problems. This can be as simple as identifying seniors or maybe disabled individuals in the neighborhood who need help trimming back the bushes that are hanging over in the sidewalks, or cutting back weeds, and mobilizing volunteers right around the block to help these people rather than complaining to neighborhood services. And it can go on to larger and bigger issues that need to be dealt with. And it sets up a lot of cooperative efforts between and among different neighborhoods. I know there are individuals who have issues with MBI, with some of the neighborhood names that have been preliminarily identified or initially. I know there are fears and concerns that maybe taxes or fees are going to come out of this process. And I recognize and appreciate those concerns, those differences of opinion, but that's precisely why I like the flexibility of the MBI process and structure as proposed and as you had presented at your study session. It provides a framework, a foundation for neighborhood groups to be voluntarily formed and recognized by the city, opening up avenues for increased communication. Each neighborhood group will be forming its own guidelines, its own bylaws. There are absolutely no mandates or provisions for taxing or fees included. For example, I don't like the name of the general neighborhood that I reside in. Well, there's nothing to prevent me from forming my own happy hood. Quotes around that. And that is in the dictionary as a neighborhood. So I'm not going off into any, foreign language there. So there's nothing to prohibit me from talking to other neighbors, getting to know them, working together with them, and eventually renaming our neighborhood if a consensus is reached through this process. I see all kinds of opportunities with this. So in closing, my home is in Core Commerce City. I love where I live, and I see the formation of recognized neighborhood organizations as leading to safer, healthier, happier neighborhoods, and let's all remember we are all neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone? Yep, we have a couple here. Mr. McInerney, your light's still on? Mr. Bullock.
Thank you, Sandy, for coming in and so eloquently explaining what we explained last week in the fact that this isn't something that we are imposing anything on anyone. It has a flexibility rate that is infinite. So I am so glad that in your own way that you explained it better than sometimes than we could. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in this evening, Ms. Carruthers.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to, just for the sake of the audience, confirm two things. One is this process does not, and I emphasize does not, have any authority to impose any level of taxes. The designation of a neighborhood does not carry with it the authority of any level of government to levy any taxes. That was said by Sandy, it was said previously by Council, and I just wanted to reaffirm it for the benefit of the audience that no taxes are involved with this process. The second thing I wanted to emphasize is that this document, if adopted by the City Council, is a work in process. It means that if a name of a neighborhood is given under this map that would be adopted if you act upon it this evening, does not mean, as cast in stone, that that neighborhood can't then come before the city manager's office, doesn't even have to come back to the council, and justify a change of name. So it's a work in progress, and it's a document that serves a purpose, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be changed if a need arises to change it. And it's a simple process to change it. The city manager's office can do that. That's the way the resolution is written, that the council authorizes the city manager to do it. If he chooses, he can bring it back to council, but he doesn't have to if the neighbors are requesting a change, for example, in the name. That can be done administratively. Just wanted to make those comments for clarification.
Great. Thank you, Bob, and that's a perfect time for me to make for the record a letter that all of us received at our dais, and I will give you a copy so that you can have it as part of the discussion this evening. Next, I will call Trudy Smith.
Trudy Smith, 7142 Pontiac Street.
Good evening.
Kemp Neighborhood Association, Commerce City, Colorado, 80022. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to say exactly what Bob just said, except I wanted to tell you a little story about my neighbor. I was over visiting one day, and she said, and by the way, I'm not for this neighborhood thing either. And so we sat down at the kitchen table, and she explained to me how she didn't want to have to pay fees, have covenants, yada, 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 yada. And I said, oh, Patty, I think you have this mixed up with an HOA. That's a what is that? Homeowners Association. And that's all run by the builder initially in conjunction with the city codes and blah, blah. And this has nothing to do with that, Patty. You know what? This is going to be a great, positive, wonderful thing for us because you and I are friends, you and I and Hugo are friends, you and I and Lee are friends, because somebody got out and introduced themselves and made an effort to get to know us. And so now we have common interest, we watch each other's back, we have a safer neighborhood, and it's just the beginning. It's like our little music in the church parking lot, music and dancing in the church parking lot thing that we do every summer. It's like that because people come from all the neighborhoods, but we don't have a park to put it in, so we can't call it music in the park. So we have this great gathering, people come, we have food. Last year, I don't remember, I think we had 75 or 80 people show up. We had live music. This is the kind of wonderful thing that can come from neighborhoods. And it starts with boundaries, it starts with neighbors meeting neighbors, and it starts with the kinds of things that are actually going on now in Kemp neighborhood. And I belong to that group, and I would love to have you help us join our meetings, come and be with us. And she said, oh, Trudy, thank you so much for explaining that to me. I totally misunderstood. So the reason I'm here is, I think, for the same reason that Bob spoke up, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you've already been educated. But the reason I brought it up tonight is because I feel so strongly. I've seen this come from groundwork. I've been to the neighborhood, what do you call them, Sean? You went to the neighborhood. NUSA, that's Neighborhood USA Association meetings. It's amazing the kind of wonderful camaraderie that can come from council and city staff working with and literally soliciting the opinions of the neighbors. It all starts right here with this Neighborhood Boundaries Initiative. And I just want to tell you that I can't urge you more than I am now that you need to keep an open mind, that people speaking against this initiative may not understand it, no matter what's been said, what's been written, and what's going on. It's just a misunderstood issue. So for having said all of that, I just want to thank you and prepare you for the fact that Kemp Neighborhood Association wants a park. So just get ready, because we're going to be here soliciting till the cows come home.
All right, thank you for coming in. Anybody have any questions? I guess Mr. Amador does.
Trudy, first of all, I want to thank you for your enthusiasm. It's definitely a breath of fresh air just to hear the insight that you have and the feedback. So thank you. I think staff and the organization has put in a lot of hard work for the boundaries and the naming conventions. I think everyone, at least here on the staff side and the city council side, recognize that change is difficult. And so again, the intent is to be positive. Again, echoing what Bob and a few people did say, that the flexibility of the naming conventions is key to this. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Councilwoman Carson.
Ms. Smith, thank you, and Ms. Crothers, thank you. You both have touched on something that I guess that I have felt all along, is that there is a need to belong, and when people feel they belong to something, it usually does produce something great. I spent my whole life growing up in unincorporated Adams County, and until we moved to Commerce City, that's where I always was. And you just kind of floundered in there because I guess you're just a child of the county. There was no identification. We all identified ourselves by maybe the builders who built our homes or something. So I did feel like I really belonged to a neighborhood when I moved out here, and I could say that I was a River Run resident. And it's a camaraderie then that you do form there. And so I do think it is something positive, and I think that some neighborhoods may flourish faster than others, but I think that that enthusiasm will be contagious, and when they start to see the progress and the relationships that are built out of this, and then I do believe you will all cross boundaries and work and visit within each other's neighborhoods. But it's nice to be able to identify yourself as something other than just the city. I always say to people, I live in River Run in Commerce City, but River Run is who I really am. Those are my neighbors, those are my friends, and like you said, those are the people that when somebody's sick, you go do their driveway or mow their grass or something. So yes, thank you for both of you for sharing your insight and being so positive and forward-thinking in this project.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Crothers, Ms. Crothers, Ms. Smith for coming in. Sandy, Ms. Crothers, I'm getting too many people on the brain. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Now, that's everybody that I had on the list. I'm going to go to the audience. Please raise your hand if you'd like to come up and speak. And, well, how many? Okay, I see 2, 3. Anyone else? 4. Anyone else? I'm going to start in the back. We'll have Mr. Leffel come up first.
Gene Leffel, 6530 Brighton Boulevard, in the Garden Terrace subdivision of what is now known as Commerce City, established in 1922. Everybody can look on their tax bill, I'm sure you've got it looming there, and find out what the subdivision name is of where you live. Mine happens to be Garden Terrace. It's established in 1922. And if you take time to look when you come down Brighton Boulevard, you'll see that you can still see the terracing of the other properties that adjoin mine, because they were, in fact, separated from my property. Mine is the original Garden Terrace property. I wasn't part of the work done by Community Enterprise. The naming of my particular area was done by city staff. I think probably over the last 8 or 9 years as I've came and addressed the council, I always say what subdivision I live in. But I was never consulted by city staff directly when they decided to call my area Mill Valley. And I thought to myself, well, why would they choose Mill Valley? And I must admit my thoughts were wrong, because I thought that perhaps it had something to do with the paper mill, which was also constructed in 1922. As a matter of fact, the gentleman that lived at my house at one time did a lot of the work down there. I found that out through a lot of research. But I was wrong. It wasn't because of the paper mill. It was actually because of the grain mill. It's not anywhere near as old. It's certainly larger, than my place, but it was constructed, it's my understanding, in the 50s. So I pondered over that. Being a member of the Historical Society, one of the charter members, and knowing the city is interested in historical preservation, there's been a lot of talk here in this council chambers about that. Why would we invent a name here in 2013 and give it to a place that was named many years ago with the correct name? So I'm a little troubled by that would be given the name of Mill Valley. Also, as I heard Trudy Smith come up here, and I thought, because she lives on the same street as my son, over on Pontiac Street, just south of 72nd Avenue. That's the Wooten subdivision of Derby, as it clearly states on the property ownership paperwork. The Wooten subdivision. But yet she apparently is in the Kemp neighborhood. It just seems a little confusing. And I think people should feel free to call their neighborhoods the neighborhood name that they feel comfortable with. And I do feel there is a certain value in giving these neighborhoods these designations. Many people will talk about Derby, one of the original towns, if you will, that was absorbed into our city. So I think there is merit in the project. However, as several pointed out, I think we do need to retain that flexibility for those who may feel that their particular area has been misdescribed, to have the opportunity to get the name that either is historically correct, as is in my case, or perhaps the name that the large group in the area identify themselves as. I'm not confused, as was indicated by another speaker earlier tonight. I know this won't cause me to be in an HOA. I know it won't cause me to have any more taxes. But I'm somewhat proud of my little neighborhood. Not that there's very many people that live there anymore. Very few residents in my neighborhood, actually. Even fewer yet that are even aware of this project. Mr. Cerna touched on a subject about the money associated to these types of projects. I thought about that for a moment and thought, well, it would be nice if the money that is brought in towards this project was distributed equally. And I thought about my neighborhood, a neighborhood which incidentally produces approximately 1/3 of the city's annual budget. Will we get our fair share? Or will we just kind of be, because of the lack of number of people there, be looked over and passed over as we have been with other improvements in the city? We contribute our share, 1/3 of the city's budget, coming right off Brighton Boulevard into your pocket. But over and over again, I see my neighborhood passed over when we're talking about projects and things that are being done in the city. The very neighborhood that contributes is forgotten. I'm troubled by that. So, to sum it up, I do think that there's merit to giving these neighbors a way to form groups and associate. Just give them the name that they want, the correct name that's really theirs. Thank you.
Anyone have any comments? Yes, we do. We have Mr. Benson to start with.
Thank you. How many people do live in the Garden Terrace subdivision?
Well, I don't know if anybody wants to admit to living there.
Are you the only one who lives there?
No, there are others. There are others. I would conservatively speculate that as far as actual legal residents of the Garden Terrace subdivision, there's probably less than 20, maybe 24
Is
at the most.
Suncor in the Garden Terrace subdivision?
I believe it is today. After tonight, well, we won't know about that anymore. They may be in the Mill Valley.
I had a question for the staff. Where did the name Mill Valley come from?
Good evening. It comes from the Hungarian flour mill that's located within that property. It's a visible landmark in the area.
The what?
The Hungarian flour mill that's...
The flour mill. Is that a historical name for that area?
I don't believe so. We named it based on the landmark.
Seems like we could call it some kind of name that's had some history in Commerce City, but, you know, Mr. Leffel, as Mr. Gaylor says, the people in your Garden Terrace subdivision can come in and talk to the staff and try to get a different designation. This isn't just written in stone.
I understand
It can be
that.
changed according to the wishes of the people who live in a particular place. In other words, you don't have to live with a label. People who live in a particular place don't have to live with a label that's been placed on it by the city if you want to change it.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I would reminisce about the time when we wanted to change the name of the city and how well that went over with a lot of people. I think in the case of this particular renaming of individual areas within the city is probably no more popular than the idea of changing the name of the entire city. Yes, a map can be redrawn any day with new names put on it. But then you got all those old pesky maps laying around that were made before that people are still using. He gets you out of date real quick. But thank you, Jim. I'm estimating maybe a couple dozen people in Garden Terrace subdivision.
Mr. Bullock.
Piggybacking a little bit on what Jim said, you can just, you know you can get together with your other 23 neighbors and change it to the Garden Terrace subdivision and have that on the map as a designation. And Suncor isn't in Garden Terrace. Suncor is at the other end of Brighton Boulevard in the Riverside. It would be more designated on the Riverside end of it than the Garden Terrace end of it. A lot of people look at the tax bill and look at the name that's designated there, and that is one of the things that they did not want to do, is go by every little tax bill and try to make a designation for neighborhoods. This has been explained 2 or 3 times too, because then this map would have in the core city 1,000 different names instead of the ones that are here. We tried to do it down to landmarks, different neighborhoods, and when people were asked and responded back to the questions, the overwhelming majority of the people that came back with a designation, that's the one they went with. You know, at any given time, if a subgroup of that neighborhood in Kemp wants to be the Wooten neighborhood, they can change to the Wooten neighborhood. But, you know, the designation Kemp came from the school that was predominant in that neighborhood, as did Central, as did Rose Hill, but Rose Hill also came from the cemetery. So I already know you know this, Gene, so this I'm preaching to the choir also. So that is why we did not go to tax bills and use legal descriptions for every little neighborhood.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, Renee. And I would point out that if you go down to the Riverside subdivision, you find everybody's dead. So I doubt they really care too much about what you call them. Because the residents.
What's funny about Riverside, they care more down there about their designation of that cemetery and that name and that subdivision than some of the people that you're talking about, because that is a truly, dead or alive, just like Rose Hill, a truly historic designation. You know, so I wouldn't make light of the fact that seeing how just because they're dead, that cemetery has a very historic place in our city, and 3/4 of it is in our city. Only 1/4 of it is in Denver.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to reduce the historical significance of that place. I'm merely saying that if you poll the occupants of that particular area, I don't think you're going to get a response. Thank you.
They said Riverside.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Leffel.
Thank you.
Okay, in the back, Jean, or Joy, I'm sorry, Joy.
You all received a letter from me earlier this evening. I really would appreciate it if you'd all read it and look at the data that has been submitted. These percentages on the community enterprise data that was handed out at their most recent neighborhood meetings, these percentages are really small. They also added 4 new questions halfway through the survey, which basically made it into a completely different survey.
Excuse me, Joy, for 1 second, please. Sorry to interrupt you, but I need you to state your name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Joy Bishop, 6751 East 64th Avenue.
Good evening.
They added 4 new questions to the survey, which made it a completely different survey, because now it's asking for people's opinions on whether there should be boundaries and whether their area should be named, rather than asking them what the name of their area was. So it makes it a completely different survey. So I question their data, I question their numbers, and I question whether this project is really worth the money we're spending in city employees and their time. I question whether this project is really worth pursuing as far as what it's going to cost, because no one has discussed the cost. No one has discussed any money related to this project other than possible grant money. So I think there's a discussion here that hasn't been had about what is this going to cost the city? If the city decides to put up signs in these neighborhoods, what is that going to cost? This discussion has not been had. So I think in addition to my letter, there are some things that you as a council have not discussed. I commend you, Mayor Ford, for asking to recuse from voting on this. I really appreciate you doing that. I was part of the Imagine Coalition when it was first formed. It wasn't formed for this purpose, it was formed for a different purpose. It morphed into this, and I believe that Renee Bullock is still part of that Imagine Coalition and has had a huge part in deciding the names that go on this map. And I think it would be really good of him if he recused himself from this vote as well. And so as a citizen, I'm asking him to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay there for a second, because there are some folks that have some comments or questions. Start with Councilwoman Carson.
Ms. Bishop, thank you for coming in, and thank you for the letter. I think most of us did read it when we first came in this evening. The only thing that I question is, in your letter, you put that only 6% of the residents thought it was vitally important. And that is correct, because there is a checkbox that said vitally important. But on that first...
But that isn't 6% of the residents. That is 6% of the people who responded to the survey after they added these questions.
That's right.
So it's a very small percent of the total.
Okay. But in a survey, we can only count the ones who participated. Even if we sent out, I think it was 900 is what we sent out, somewhere around that. You can only count the ones that participated. And in that question of how important it was to them to have names that identified them, only 12% said it wasn't important. From the starting of someone important to very important to vitally important, it was 60%. The next question was, knowing boundaries in your neighborhood make you feel more proud or connected. That was 58% yes, 13% no. How important is it for neighborhoods in Commerce City to have clear boundaries? Only 12% said not important. From the somewhat important all the way up to the vitally important, it was 79%. So I do find in those that, and I did leave one out, let's see, knowing the name of your neighborhood make you feel more proud. Anyway, when I read the data that came in, I find a large majority of the citizens who participated in that survey thought there was some value in this. Maybe most of them didn't check the box of vitally important, but most of them did check the box somewhere between somewhat important to very important to vitally important. So I do, when I see this, I see a very large support of those that participated. I don't have a clue what their feeling was, those that did not participate. So I can only look at the data that we did receive. And like I said, in your letter, you did state it correctly, that a small percentage said vitally important. But it wasn't stated how many checked the box from somewhat important on the way up. So I am looking at this, and I did read your letter. And
I'm merely stating that by changing the questions in the middle, they have skewed the data. We have no data on this sheet that they handed out. No data at all on the 384 surveys they received before they changed the questions.
Okay.
So the data on this sheet is misleading. It's not accurate. And if you add up 384 and 456, it comes up to 840, but they claim to have 892 surveys turned in. So somebody at Community Enterprise needs some lessons in math. And because that doesn't add up, I question some of the other numbers on this sheet. I'm sorry, but, you know, if you can't add two numbers up and come up with the right total, then there's something the matter.
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation. And I appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Bullock.
Thank you for coming in, Joy. I sit on a lot of committees. I sit on a lot of boards. We make a lot of decisions for the city. I sit on Sand Creek. I sit on the RAB. I sit on numerous boards. If every board and every committee I sat on, I would have to recluse myself from voting because of that, then none of us up here could vote on majority of the issues that come up before us. I was on the Image Coalition. I went around, I took pictures, I've been on this board. I was the one that originally suggested this in 2005, that we start naming the neighborhoods. I was the one that originally suggested this when you were on Community Enterprise, and it was a good idea to you. Those 4 questions that were changed were 4 questions that people asked for additional data. They wanted to dig deeper into the question of why we were doing this, and we explained why we were doing this, and they still were in the affirmative on going along with naming the neighborhoods. There are people in the city that aren't going to be happy with a lot of things. There are some people in the city that aren't going to be happy with anything. This is one of the things that's going to help the city move ahead positively. You know, I don't understand why you're asking me to recluse, but I'm not going to. I'm going to vote on this. If you have an objection to that, I'm sorry. But I am not going to recluse myself from a lot of votes that I have to be on for different committees and boards that are within this city. Yes, Bob?
Mr. Attorney.
I think it'd be appropriate to put this issue to rest with an explanation. There is a legal criteria for when a council member has to recuse himself from voting on an issue that's in front of you. Now, the mayor expressed a personal desire, and I certainly didn't disagree with his personal desire, but that was not a legal reason why he had to recuse himself. The test is whether or not a council member has a conflict of interest because of a financial investment in the issue that is before you. If you have a financial interest in the matter that you're voting on, because you have a personal investment in that particular project, such as a zoning case is a good example, then there's no question, legally you need to recuse yourself. But if you have a personal interest, not a financial interest, but a personal interest because you've worked on a project or because you feel that it is good for the city and have already expressed that interest on a legislative matter, you certainly don't have to recuse yourself from voting. And that's why I haven't brought to the attention of the council that Councilman Bullock needs to legally recuse himself from voting. If he chose to, for whatever reason, I certainly wouldn't object to that from a legal point of view. But he doesn't legally have to unless it turns out that he has a personal financial investment some way in this project.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. Joy, would you like to respond before I move forward?
I think he has an investment in a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of work on this coalition.
Okay, as I'm going to go with Mr. Gaylor's side of this, which therefore I will leave it up to Mr. Bullock to whether he wants to personally or not, and he has stated that he does not want to recluse himself. So I'm going to move on with the council members. We'll go to Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bishop, for the letter and all, and I understand where you're coming from, and I think this is just to really identify certain areas within the neighborhood. I mean, where I grew up, it was Nob Hill, and as other cities, other developments came in through the area where I lived, they were named as well. And just, identify landmarks and everything, or where you're going around in town, and you could say, I live in such and such. And it does help with identity here in the city. I know a lot of times things aren't done correctly here in the city, and if they could get some of these names done right to start out with, so we're not changing the map all the time within the next several months, that would be great. And I would suggest you get with the staff and anyone else who wants to have their area where they live identified differently from what we have. I don't see a problem with that. And I know that things sometimes get kind of grouped up and based on other people's decisions and all, so that's why we're where we're at today. But I did ask the question last week at study session, do we have what is this going to cost the city? And I was it right that the city is not putting any money into this, or is this part of a budget type thing?
At this point, the city's investment has been staff time. There are certain grant programs where dollars come to the city. The best example recently is funds related to National Night Out. Mm-hmm. So we have contemplated using neighborhood organizations as a way to distribute those funds, but those are not city funds.
Okay. But in the near future, there's going to be signs made up and or landmarks put in maybe some of these areas?
That's certainly possible.
Okay. But as right now, that's not part of this?
No, there's no money currently budgeted for those efforts.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joy.
Okay, Mr. McEldowney.
I figure out how I want to say this. I'm amazed at our ability to get really good subject matter twisted around so that we make it seem like there's some aspect of it that has been taken in the wrong direction. we're talking about organizing our community. For the folks that are commenting tonight, so many of you have been the outspoken, the advocates for the community. This process at its foundation is about providing an even greater structure to help that happen. So we can talk about the ills of the survey methodology and that it's not perfect, but it wasn't intended to be perfect. The surveys used were designed to get a feel, a temperature, to get a direction. I think anybody that's been involved in this community for any amount of time or any community knows how difficult it is to get people to a ballot box, much less a survey. Thankfully, there was the result, or they got the turnout that they did. I'd love to have seen more. Could it have been scientifically done? Sure. Would have cost money, as you know, with your background. It's a whole other realm to take a survey down that path. I think it's important that we all take a pause, take a breath, take a step back and look at what this is really all about. If a handful of people are unhappy with a designation in this document, don't feel like they had the ability to have the input, there's an opportunity to have that happen. We're not talking about zoning. We're not talking about property rights. We're not talking about tax implications. None of those things that would have a negative or, harmful impact as a result of this. We're talking about giving people a framework within which to work with their neighbors to create positive change, hopefully, in their neighborhoods. And for that matter, I'm going to vote on this yes tonight, and I would hope that you stay involved, and I would hope that you and anyone else who's concerned about a designation on the map pursue the opportunity to change that with staff. But I don't know that there's more to worry about than that. I don't think it's I think we need to make this thing happen and let people get to work with doing good in their community and hopefully go out and pursue grants and create positive change in the community as opposed to finding the faults with what's gone on here. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, thank you, Ms. Bishop, for coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
See the hands again. I think I have two more. We're going to keep going from the back forward. Mr. Cheney. You just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mike Cheney, 7980 Olive Street. I live in the Monaco neighborhood. My subdivision is the Cahill subdivision, but the Monaco neighborhood goes from 72nd all the way up to 80th. And in between the two railroad tracks, the Burlington Northern on one side and the Union Pacific on the other. It's made up of several subdivisions. So I don't call it the Cahill neighborhood, I call it the Monaco neighborhood. And to speak about something positive about neighborhood identification, a few years ago I attended the NUSA conference in Anchorage, Alaska. And I don't know if people know this or not, but Anchorage, Alaska is made up of a whole bunch of small towns that were incorporated into one big town. And the city council, when they did this, the founding fathers, decided to keep each of those little towns as a neighborhood so that they had their own little identity, all under one big town. And they set it up so that each little neighborhood had their own neighborhood group, such as the Kemp neighborhood or the Monaco neighborhood group. And when the council decides that they want to do something to rehabilitate a particular area, they go to that neighborhood group and say, hey, look, what do you want on this intersection, on this corner? What does your neighborhood need? And then the neighborhood group goes out and talks to all the folks in the community and then comes back to the city council and says, this is what our folks want. And the city council then decides how to go about getting that. I see that as something that can be done here in Commerce City. Commerce City is, as everybody knows, split between the north and the south. You got, 15,000 acre wildlife refuge in the middle. But in the north, you have existing organizations known as HOAs for the most part. In the south, you really don't have anything. You have someone that comes up and says, hey, I want this, or I want that, but it really doesn't tell you what that particular area wants. If you go with the neighborhood identification, then you can have these groups come together at a smaller level, come forward to the city council as representatives of that smaller section and say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we'd like to see, hey, we don't like what you're doing here, and then you guys can act on it that way. But you'll be able to get what that area wants and not what someone outside that area tells you they need. As a member of the Board for Community Enterprise, I'm really excited about the potential of working in some of these areas that you've identified through this identification program and being able to get input from those communities and getting them organized to where they can come to you and say, this is what we need. Instead of saying the South needs this, we can then go and say, hey, you know what? As been presented tonight, the Kemp neighborhood would like a park. Now you know. Now you can go over to Mill Valley or whatever it is, or the Garden Terrace, whatever they end up deciding on, and say, what do you guys need? And they can make their presentation to you and say, this is what we want, this is what we need, this is what we feel would be right for our neighborhood, and you guys can make your decisions. I can't see anything bad coming out of this. Yeah, some people might be upset about the name, but there's provisions put into this that can fix that. And I believe it's been presented by not only some of you on council, but some of the people that have spoke already about the fluid mobility of this program. So I can't, like I said, I can't see anything bad coming from it. Give you an example of something great coming from a neighborhood identification. How many of you attend the People's Fair every year? It's been going on for almost 40 years. That was started by a neighborhood organization in the Capitol Hill area. That was because Denver identified their neighborhoods. They got like-minded people together in the neighborhood, and by like-minded I mean people that reside in the neighborhood. They may not be the same political or religious or whatever, but they reside in the neighborhood for a reason. They like the neighborhood. And they put together something, and it's grown. I could see that happening here. I could see a neighborhood organization coming out of one of these neighborhoods and doing some wonderful things for the city. And it's just another avenue of getting, as Mr. Cerna keeps putting it, things that the residents deserve. We've got old-time residents that have lived here a long time, and it's about time they got what they needed, and this is one way of helping them get what they needed. So I'm pretty sure you guys are going to pass this. I don't know why, just from the comments that I've heard from the council. And so I'm excited to move on to the next phase and see what we can do.
Okay, any comments or questions for Mr. Cheney? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have one left. Ms. Bullock.
Deborah Bullock, 6130 Ivanhoe Street. There are 5 neighborhoods in Commerce City south of 96. One is Rose Hill, one is Adams City, one is Irondale, one's DuPont, and the third one is Derby, or the fifth one is Derby. So, Andrew, you live in Derby. Renee, you live in Rose Hill. Crystal, you live in Adams City. Gene, his subdivision is in Adams City. Trudy lives in Derby. Some of the other people that came up, Rick, you live in Derby. That's where your neighborhood is. Danny, Pam, you live in Derby. Joy, you live in Rose Hill. So if you want to make it simple, there's 5 subdivisions. There's 5 neighborhoods south of 96th. But there's a lot of different neighborhoods south of 96th. And I, too, have been part of this, and I think they've done a great job trying to identify where people live. So we all know that these are the historic parts of our neighborhood, but the new residents in our city have no idea. And so that's how they relate to the schools. So that's how the schools came in to the play, because they can relate to an area where their kids go to school. They might be able to relate to a subdivision, Tichy, Jean subdivision, Memory Lane Garden subdivision, Irondale Gardens. All those are subdivisions. If you put all the subdivisions on the map, you're going to have 50 subdivisions on this map. So maybe you do a map like that, and maybe you do a map that's simple. I'm not sure how you want it to look. I do know they spent 2 years doing this, and they've done a lot of work. And I think that it's not to tell the people where they live. People have said to me, I don't need a map to tell me where I live. I know where I live. But I can tell you, people don't know where they live. They don't even know what their subdivision is. And they've moved into our city, and they don't have a clue. People north of 96th do not know where Derby is. There are a lot of people that I've run into that they've said to me, well, is there a historic part of Commerce City anywhere? And they live north of 96th. They don't even know where we are. So I do think it's a valuable thing to put it on a map and to make sure that people can identify with an area. New names, I'm not so sure about. Mill Valley is a new name. I've never heard of Mill Valley. I had to come and ask Chris Kramer what Mill Valley meant, because I really didn't know either. From the Historical Society perspective, we do want it to be historically accurate. We want to make sure that what we're putting out, or what someone is putting out, is really historically accurate, that we're not making up new names. I don't think anything is just been made up. I don't think someone just dreamt up a name. I think that they've put in some thought into it. It's either the land that was owned by the families, or some of the historic areas. So there are reasons for all the names. Could be a school, could be a subdivision. But it is overall, I think, a very positive project. So now the Commerce City Historical Society has a new project. We need to explain to everybody what all these neighborhoods were named and why they were named what they are named. So that's maybe something that we'll have to start working on. So I don't think it's about data. I don't think it's about, who answered, who took the surveys, who did what. I think we can all pretty much look at the map and say, there's a reason that these places are named the way they are. But what I would want to make sure that you think about is it historically accurate? And, one way to find out is the tax records. You can find out if something is historically correct. Rose Hill consisted of a large area in the city. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal is Rose Hill, and that's a big area. So, those 5 main areas on the map, you need to make sure that those areas are correct. Rose Hill is a very small area on the map, and Rose Hill is a big area in the city. Went all the way to Adams City. So those are the things I think that you have to think about as a council. And if you don't know, take some time to research it and make sure that it's accurate. But overall, I want to congratulate Community Enterprise. They've done a great job, and they've worked they've worked hard. They've spent a lot of hours to try to get this done. So, the bickering with the people saying, they don't want this, what do they want? They should come and put their input, and I know that people will listen to them. So I just want to congratulate Community Enterprise.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have one person that would like to comment. Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you, Deborah, for being here tonight. I agree with everything that you said. To me, this is a matter of restoring some historic pride in people that live in certain parts of the city. And you have these 5 historic names. I don't know why we need to get new names. I don't understand why that was done.
They're not new names. The names are subdivisions.
Well,
Everything else on the map,
but
you
not areas.
have those names on there. You have Rose Hill, you have Adams
Right.
City.
I mean,
But
those 5 should be sufficient, I would think, unless somebody maybe within one of those 5 think we want to break off and have our own subdivision name. But maybe it might be premature for us to be voting on this tonight, because I think some good ideas have been presented, but I agree with everything that you've said about that. Maybe we ought to just have those 5. But if somebody does want to break off their subdivision, come in and ask the council to do that. Because those 5 pretty much describe the areas.
if you look at the map, you have school designations, so some people relate to schools. You have subdivision designations, and some people, there are some very predominant subdivisions, like Tichy subdivision. The people in those subdivisions know they live in Tichy subdivision. They know that. When they move in there, people tell them that. Parts of Rose Hill, they probably don't think they live in Rose Hill. Because, Rose Hill School is the Rose Hill area.
Well, specifically, how would you do this then?
Well, I think you need to decide, and I know that Community Enterprise has done this, what is the purpose of this map? It's to give pride in the community, for people to say, what area do you live in, and what do they relate to? And I think that's what the survey came about. I think that's what, people said. I live in Central, I live in Derby, I live in, whatever, because they can relate to that. Historically, there's only 5 neighborhoods in the city. Historically, if you want to do it historically, but is that the purpose of the map? Or is that the purpose of the whole project? I don't think that's what it was meant to be. I look at it that way because I'm on the Commerce City Historical Society. North of 88th is Henderson, and then you have the new lands up there with all the new building, with all the new neighborhoods.
How would you go about doing this if it was up to you to make the decision? How would you name these areas?
I would name them what they are, the historical 5 neighborhoods that exist in our city. And then if you want subdivisions in there, everyone has a subdivision. So where do those, if you put all the subdivisions on the map, you're going to have 50 subdivisions. Now, up north, that's what they did. Reunion, all those different areas are subdivisions. It's all Commerce City. But we know it because it was built as Reunion. It was built as Frontera. It was built as River Run. That's how we know it, because we were here when they built it. The people that are living in our city now were not here when Rose Hill was the subdivision. They weren't here when it was Irondale. And, most of the people in the core city are not long-term residents of our city. There's some left, but a lot of people that are living there now have moved into the city, and they don't know anything about Rose Hill and Adams City. They relate to the neighborhoods or to the schools. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the map. I don't think that anyone has dreamt up a name that is not accurate in some way. Jean's subdivision is very small, so if you put that little subdivision on a map, I don't even know if you'll be able to see it. It's so tiny. So that's what you would run into if you had every single subdivision on the map. Now, you have some subdivisions, you have some schools, you have some, neighborhoods. It's a mix of, a lot of different things. But it's not, there's nothing wrong with it as far as, what they put the names on. So, now if they would have left out Rose Hill or something, then we would have something to say about that. But all those names are there. All of the historic names are on the map. They've just broken it down a little bit. Had a few subdivisions in there, so that's our comment.
Okay. Mr. Bullock.
In answer to, there are 5 main subdivisions, and it was broken down to manageable spots. And so if you just, we wouldn't have Victory Crossing. We would have Rose Hill, so that is why they were broken down to the to actually incorporate neighborhoods where you can have neighborhood groups that you don't have a whole Rose Hill group that starts on the other side of Quebec Street and goes all the way down to South Platte. So how many different issues would that one group have? If you have neighborhood groups, it breaks it down to just small neighborhoods. And that's why this map was broken down to different school districts and different subdivisions to make it manageable and to make it neighborhoods. So neighborhood groups could work together for their common good.
That's a good point that he brings up because, since the city was established, there are new areas. Victory Crossing is new, and that's history now. We can't say that didn't happen. It's historic. It's Victory Crossing. It will be here forever now. The Sand Creek area, although it was always been there, it was, in the beginning, really part of Rose Hill. All those areas were here. The land was here, but there are new areas now in the city that it's fine to call it Victory, Crossing, because that's what it is.
Seeing no one else, I want to thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. I went through everybody that had an interest in speaking in the audience. I am now open for a motion from the council. Mr. McEldowney.
Move to approve Resolution 2013-3 concerning recognizing neighborhood identification boundaries for the city of Commerce City.
Okay. Mr. Teeter.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2013-03. Is there any discussion? I think everybody got it all out of the way early on. With that said, all those in favor...
Title, Mr. Mayor?
Title. I'm ready to move, Bob.
Okay.
So hurry up.
Title reads, Resolution Recognizing Neighborhood Identification Boundaries for the City of Commerce City.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And I abstain. So the motion carries, and it is unanimous. Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2013-24. Does council have any questions regarding this resolution? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council regarding this resolution? Seeing no one, I'm open for a motion. Mr. McEldowney?
Move to approve Resolution 2013-24.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock?
Second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Mr. Attorney, please read the title.
Title reads, Resolution Finding Substantial Compliance of an Annexation Petition and Setting a Public Hearing to Determine if the proposed annexation complies with the statutory requirements for such annexation, AN 230-13.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. Now we move into the portion of ordinances. Mr. Bullock, I got to step away for a few minutes. Would you take over and start with the first ordinance?
Now we move into the portion of ordinances. Does the council have any questions regarding ordinance 1954? Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions about ordinance 1954? I'm open for a motion.
I pushed my button, Mr.
Oh,
Yeah, I think Jim had a question, and I had a question before we're ready for motion.
okay. Jim, what is your question?
Thanks. Have we computed, if we put a moratorium, we've decided to tax marijuana at 7.5%, I guess, in addition to the regular sales tax. By placing a moratorium, do we have any estimate about how much money this will cost the city?
Mayor Pro Tem Bullock, I will attempt to answer the question, and then I think Mr. Gaylor will help me out. We have not run those calculations because we don't know what businesses are contemplating being established in Commerce City. We've had inquiries from two businesses. There's one who has made an application of those two. Don't know if either one of those will complete the application process and receive City Council approval.
Say if one of them did complete the process and wanted to open, what would the absence of one facility cost us? If you don't have that information, that's fine. I'm going to have to abstain because I'm not going to have enough information to vote on it, but I don't want you to guess at it.
We do not have that information. It would be based on estimated sales of a business, and we've not been provided that.
Okay, Mr. Gaylor?
Just to add to what the city manager has said, we don't want to confuse the medical marijuana application that we have pending with the recreation marijuana application. So we do have a medical marijuana application pending that you may be aware of.
Is that the only one that the 7.5% would apply to?
Right.
No. It would apply to both, but the point is that the recreation the recreation marijuana process, we don't have any in process right now because the licensing process, if you recall, needs to first be approved by the state of Colorado effective July 1 of 2013. And then we have until October of 2013 in order to implement it, if we were going to. So, in my opinion, the imposition of a moratorium at this point in time does not cost the city any money because we're not in a position to grant any licenses at this time. Now, it also goes without saying that when you impose a moratorium, if during the course of time you choose to rescind that moratorium and to then undertake a process to approve licenses, you can do that, and it simply means repealing the moratorium ordinance. So you're not locking yourself into a requirement here that you can't rescind and change if you choose to. So the answer to your question right now, Councilman Benson, is that there is no loss of revenue if this ordinance is passed. You can take another look at it after July of 2013 if you choose to, and then decide, hey, keep the moratorium in effect or rescind the moratorium at that time if you wanted to.
You know, given what you said, I'm just wondering, why are we imposing a moratorium at all? Because if somebody comes in and applies, then we're going to have the ability to rescind the moratorium or not. I just don't see how imposing a moratorium right now when no issue exists, according to the staff. There is no issue here about anybody applying for this, so why impose a moratorium?
There is an advantage to imposing the moratorium because then you are not placed in a position of scrambling to enact licensing procedures and all that would take effect July of 2013. If you have a moratorium in effect, you don't have to deal with the licensing proceedings at all until after the state acts. So once the state acts, then you can take a whole clean look, you can take a step back and decide, do we want a moratorium or do we want to impose a licensing process? But the licensing process needs to be dealt with if you're going to enact it ready to go immediately after the state's set of rules and regulations go into effect. So the staff and my office is recommending the moratorium just to clear the air so that for the time being, you don't have to deal with it until you see how this whole thing shakes out. You know, there's another issue that I haven't even mentioned, and that is how the federal government plays into this, because as you probably know, the federal government has a law that says the use of marijuana is prohibited. Well, our state constitution is in conflict with that. And until that issue is resolved, the cities really don't know which way to go with this, because the feds could come in and say, we're going to enforce the federal law on this. So to keep the city from having to be involved in that dilemma, a moratorium is a prudent approach until this whole thing with the state and the federal government gets aired, straightened out, so that the city knows which way to turn on this whole issue.
Well, we're not required by that initiative or whatever rules and regs are going to be adopted by the state. We're not required to adopt our own, are we, before July the 1st?
No, we're not required, but if we were going to enact a licensing process that the state allows us to do, and if we're going to ignore the federal government law, then we would want to start work on the licensing process if we're going to go in that direction. This moratorium avoids you having to make that issue before the air is clear with the federal government and the state.
You know, we've had the medical marijuana legalized for how many years now? 4 or 5 years. And I know the feds did come in and shut down a few places only because they were close to schools. So I think that's a pretty good indication of how they might, especially given the current Washington administration.
It's pure speculation on my part at this time, but the federal government's attitude toward medical marijuana has been stated to be on the back burner, if you will. How the federal government will react to recreation marijuana might be a whole different matter when the time comes. So the fact that the Obama administration has said that it's not a high priority to enforce the federal law with regard to medical marijuana doesn't give me a great deal of assurance how they'll treat recreation marijuana down the road here.
Okay, Mr. McEldowney.
I think Mr. Gaylor covered most of the points I was going to make. I just want to make sure that we were all clear that based on the discussion that we had in the study session and our understanding about where the process was heading with regard to the Amendment 64 task force, it didn't make sense for us to do anything but invoke a moratorium so that we could allow the Amendment 64 decision to come out, reflect on the findings of the Amendment 64 Commission, and then undertake a specific process within Commerce City to assess how we want to, if we want to enact commercial storefront operations for recreational marijuana, completely separate and distinct from medical marijuana, which we've talked through and we've enacted any number of ordinances in support of. So I'd be ready to make a motion if the...
I have one more before we move on. Councilman Douglas.
Yes, Bob, I had a question. I know maybe we went over it last year, but is requirements in order to have a facility for medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, you have to live in the city for 2 years. Was that part of the requirements in order to had to be a Commerce City resident, or?
The only requirements the city currently has are requirements related to medical marijuana facilities, and there's no requirement that indicates they have to be a resident or in the city for a minimum of 2 years.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing no one else, I'm open for a motion. Mr. McEldowney.
Would move to approve ordinance 1954 on first reading. Council is seated.
Mr. Bullock.
Second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1954 on first reading. Is there any discussion? I have one. I'll be voting in favor of ordinance 1954. After having our study session and listening to what the chief and the attorney has had to offer and the conflicts that we may get ourselves into by not having a moratorium while the state figures out what they're going to do and how they're going to treat this, I will fully support ordinance 1954. Seeing no other discussion,
Title, Mr. Mayor?
please.
Title of Ordinance 1954 reads, an ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the establishment of any recreational marijuana-related businesses.
Thank you. I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show that the ordinance is introduced unanimously. Now we'll move on to ordinance 1955. Does the council have any questions regarding this ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Bullock.
In our study session, we were offered two different scenarios, 5 and 6. Which scenario is the one that we are ending up voting on tonight? Okay, that's all I wanted to know. I wanted to make sure that it was 5, and so I wouldn't be confused.
Mr. Douglas.
Sorry. I know I wasn't there for that night. I tried to do that long distance thing, but that didn't work. So I know it was a consensus that night, but tonight we're not going to vote on which one to move forward, right?
Yes, as a matter of fact, introduction of ordinance 1955 would be for map 5.
Okay.
That's the map, that's what's tied to the ordinance that's before us tonight. So you would be voting for, on first reading, map 5 to be the rezoning or the redistricting of the wards, so that you're clear on what's
All
being.
right. So map 6 cannot be entertained at all, right?
Well, you can entertain it. You can have discussion about it, and you could say, you know, I'm going to vote no on 5 because I like 6 better. But 5 is what's before us this evening.
Okay. I just talked to a lot of residents, and they wanted to see map 6 because it includes the area that Guillermo was talking about as being part of that ward, and now it's not going to be. So.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Well, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
In all fairness to Councilman Douglas, when you pass an ordinance on first reading, it's introducing the ordinance, as you well know, and that's the benefit of requiring 2 readings. So if you have constituents that are interested in map 6, certainly you could discuss with them and explain to them what map 5 is compared to map 6 before second reading, and then you'd be in a better position perhaps when it comes up on second reading to discuss it. But that would be my only observation and suggestion.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that's here that would like to address the council regarding this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll ask for a motion for the introduction of ordinance 1955. Mr. McEldowney.
I'll just say that neither map 5 nor 6 were perfect, but that said, I think I will make a motion to approve the map as presented tonight. So I would move to introduce ordinance 1955 on first reading. Council is seated.
Thank you. Mr. Benson.
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to introduce ordinance 1955. Mr. Attorney?
Title reads, for ordinance 1955, an ordinance reestablishing the boundaries of the 4 wards of the city of Commerce City.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. The title has been read. Is there any further discussion that needs to take place before we vote? Seeing none, I'll ask. Good call. You just barely got in there because it wasn't there. Councilwoman Carson.
I wasn't going to say anything, but Mr. Cerna, I do want to address you. I hate losing part of my ward. I truly do, and I hate the idea that this will be your third change. But these changes must take place, and I know the argument that I made. I felt like I was supporting some of the residents in my ward, and there was just no way to keep all of it. So I did hear your concerns, and I truly do feel bad for anybody who's had to go through 3 ward changes. I'm not sure that you're feeling whether you're part of Commerce City, north, south, or where you belong. So hopefully in the future, as the map changes, it affects your area very little, and you get to stay in the same ward for years to come. So thank you for your comments tonight.
Okay. Seeing no more, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show that the ordinance is introduced on first reading, 8-1. Moving forward in the agenda, we go into presentations. And the presentation for this evening is the transportation update. And I will call on the Assistant City Manager, Jim Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Got a presentation. It's about 52 slides tonight, filled with acronyms, so hopefully, I'm just kidding. We have about 18 slides, but we do have a few acronyms, which I will endeavor to explain here as I go through the presentation. I want to thank Darren Sterling, our interim public works director, as well as Glenn Ellis, the interim city engineer, and Chris Kramer, the community development director. They helped me put this together tonight, and as you'll see, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of other jurisdictions that we're working with right now. So first of all, I want to talk about the Department of Transportation ramp update, and I'll explain that in a moment. RTD North Metro issues that are listed there, and then a very brief update on the Tower and Pena Boulevard ramp. So RAMP, all capitals, stands for Responsible Acceleration of Maintenance and Partnerships. And this is money that CDOT discovered earlier this year. They've got $1.5 billion to be spent over the next 5 years, roughly $300 million per year, and they're divided into those 2 classifications there. Essentially, operational improvements such as overlaying roads is $175 million, and then partnerships is $125 million. And the partnerships piece actually includes the idea of an 80-20 match, 20% being from the locals. And also can include what they call devolution of roads, meaning that they could be transferred from state jurisdiction to local government jurisdiction, and then, of course, we get the maintenance bill long term. Any project, again, must be completed within 5 years. We're only eligible for CDOT projects, so we can't use this money for RTD, unfortunately. And all the pre-applications are due May 1st. This has been moving very quickly because they just announced their criteria in late February, early March. We have been meeting with the NATA jurisdictions, which again is the North Area Transportation Alliance, to talk about their projects. We had a very productive staff level meeting last Thursday that I can update you on here. We've identified 6 projects that you see on your screen here, and there were some details in the council communication. Some of those changed a little bit on Thursday after we had that discussion. We are really only going to submit 2 of these. It's the top 2 on this list, and I'll just explain them briefly. Highway 2 would actually be widening of that road from 72nd Avenue in Derby all the way up to I-76. This would be then a 4-lane section. It's estimated right now at around $25 million. And just to clarify, this will not look like 104th Avenue with the medians and everything. It'll basically just be additional asphalt, improved shoulders to get the road widened. Our local match in this case would be about $5 million. We also have a little over $2 million in faster money that is already allocated to us for our shouldering project, so we'd put that towards the allocation as well. And the idea is here that if this project were completed, this is one of those roads that would be devolved. So from 62nd Avenue near the Greyhound Park, where it splits off, all the way up to 120th then would be a city road. This is very similar to what Brighton has already done with Highway 2 north of 120th, Sable Boulevard, as well as some of the agreements Denver already has with CDOT when it becomes Colorado Boulevard to the south. 104th Avenue is the next major project. We want to complete a consistent design with the rest of what we've done on 104th. So this project would be split, really. We'd be looking at from Highway 85 over to Brighton Road. That's estimated at $13 million with a 20% local match of around $2.6 million. We think we may be able to use existing GID funds for part of that match because that was going to be used for that road widening. Yes, sir. Yes, this was a change from Thursday night. I did, and I meant to say Brighton. I'm glad you're listening. Thank you. From west of Brighton Road over into Adams County and Thornton, we would probably just do a simple asphalt section there, and there would be no local match. So Thornton, Commerce City, and Adams County would not participate west of that area. But once the whole project was done, it would be devolved, and so the 3 jurisdictions would take those over. So the third project is Highway 6 and 85, Parkway 60th Avenue interchange. We're going to apply for this project, but we don't have any hopes of getting it approved, frankly. We really just want to make sure it's on CDOT's radar when they look at the I-270 project, and hopefully they can include that as part of a system-wide improvement that they'd be making there. And I'll mention that at the bottom here. I-76 Highway 224, we originally thought this would be needed if the 72nd and Colorado Fast Track Station was going to be the end of line. Because that is probably not going to be the case now, we've decided not to go forward with this project. Plus, this is really on the edge of our city and would not provide a whole bunch of benefit to our residents. Highway 85 and 120th. Adams County is actually going to be submitting this project, and we're very supportive of that, but we will not be committing any funds at this time. We are going to be looking at providing a letter of support, though, for their application. The last one is the I-270 widening, and there's an organization through CDOT called the High Performance Tolling Enterprise, or HPTE. They do a lot of things with the toll lanes, the managed lanes on 25 and 36. They're working closely right now to develop a plan to widen I-270 with managed lanes down the middle or on the side. We're not really sure how it's going to look yet. But that would be necessary potentially before the I-70 reconstruction, because 270 will still be needed for a temporary detour. I'll stress temporary detour, not the permanent detour. And so we're going to be looking at that with them to see, again, if they can include possibly 56th Avenue, 60th in as part of that big project. So when we get to the end here, we're going to be asking for really 2 or 3 action items. One of them is to authorize the mayor to sign 2 letters of support. One would be for the Adams County application for 120th, and then second would be for the HPTE application for I-270. And I could have referenced this map while we were going through it. A little dark, though, to see.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura.
I'll give you some dark to see if you can see it.
I got to turn on my light now. There we go. All right. RTD, we have been working with consultants on concept plans and ideas from the outreach for the Station Area Master Plan, again, also known as STAMP. This was, as a reminder, was a $100,000 grant from DRCOG that we used to help guide the future investment in that area. The next community outreach is on April 25th at the Rec Center, and final adoption of that plan is planned in the fourth quarter. The RFP for the North Metro Corridor. As a reminder, there was a unsolicited proposal to RTD for the North Metro line. The General Manager, Phil Washington, did determine that that proposal had merit, and so they are going to be going out to a bid for an RFP for the whole line to get multiple bidders for that project, not just accepting the unsolicited proposal. We are going to participate with RTD in developing the scope of work. This is going to be very, very quick, though. The RFP needs to be issued by July, and they're hoping to actually have an IGA executed with each of the jurisdictions by then. So we've been allowed one representative. Chris Kramer, the Community Development Director, is going to be that one representative. He'll be our primary lead negotiator on the IGA. He's been involved in this process since the EIS many years ago. There are several items that need to be resolved before we can execute an IGA. We anticipate having another study session on this topic before July. There's some key city issues here. A second access point. This will become a little more evident on the map. A second access point potentially at 70th Avenue. Site design standards. Want to make sure that they're complying with our land development code. The other thing is that the property is currently in unincorporated Adams County, so we want to make sure that it's annexed into the city. And then also the timing of our local match. There's a lot of details in your communication about our local match commitment. Right now that's estimated at $4.7 million. We do have an MOU that locks in that number, so it will not go higher than that. But we need to determine what kind of in-kind improvements we're going to make out there, and staff time and use tax calculations. So there's going to be a lot of work on this IGA in the next several months.
Would you use your pointer, the red beam, to show where that second access point would be?
Yes. Darren's pointing it out there.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was 70th Avenue because I saw two other streets before that, and I couldn't tell if that was going to be the 70th. Now, right between 72nd and that 70th Avenue, there's a point of crossing over the O'Brien Canal with SB. Keep going up. Go to the
Right up there, yeah.
What is that?
Well, this is a point of contention right now with RTD staff. The original EIS showed 72nd Avenue up here to the north as the primary access point. And we started talking to them about having a secondary access point, especially if it was going to be an end-of-line station. The fire district was concerned about circulation. We're concerned about accessibility for our residents, and also the potential traffic conflicts it's going to create here with the Fry trucks. We were surprised when they came into a meeting a couple months ago, and they were under the impression that Fry was going to be closing before they opened. So we enlightened them that that was not the case, and they came up with this idea of, well, rather than build this down here, because that's a trailhead, and rather than build this and have the conflicts, they propose sticking this thing in the middle here, which is roughly 71st, but doesn't line up with any other road, is on a curve. It really just doesn't work from an engineering standpoint. So this is really the driving issue that we're dealing with right now, is the access point. I have one other item on this slide just to point out. We may have an opportunity to help guide the name of this station. Right now, RTD is listing it as 72nd Avenue. It's certainly appropriate for us to comment during this period, maybe include it in the IGA if we want to try to change the name of that. Staff was leaning away from calling it just the Commerce City Station, because as you'll see when we get into the other areas, we hope this is not our only station at some point. We want other stations, possibly up Highway 2 or Quebec. So we just came up with a couple other ideas of West Commerce City or even Adams Heights, anything like that. So Mill Valley. Very good. So we can talk about that at the end right here real quick. Last thing to get some feedback on tonight is this idea of the station typology. There are 4 station typologies: Neighborhood Craftsman, Main Street Historic, and then these next 2 we think are more interesting. They already have us labeled as Town Center Contemporary, but staff was supportive of either that or this Industrial Loft Modern. I wouldn't get too hung up on the names of them. It's really more the design that we'd want some feedback on. And again, we can provide that feedback during the IGA process. RTD NATE, another acronym for you. This is the North Area Transit Evaluation. So as part of the original vote in 2004 with Fast Tracks, there was roughly $9 to $10 million that was set aside for right-of-way preservation for a future line ending in Brighton. Really, it was from the river all the way over to Highway 2, just kind of a big swath drawn on a map of where that might potentially go. Our transportation plan does outline 2 different options through the city. The first one would be a new line from North Metro adjacent to Highway 2. These are both shown on our transportation plan. One of the benefits of this line is it could serve the Greyhound Park, it could serve Derby, and then once it gets up to 80th in Quebec, it really then continues up towards Brighton. The other one is a new line that would come off potentially the east line here, and that would go up Quebec, could serve Victory Crossing, but unfortunately would bypass the Greyhound Park and potentially Derby. So we're not proposing to make any decisions here tonight or asking for any guidance on it. Just to let you know, we're monitoring this. We are engaging with Brighton and RTD. We just have a lot of other issues right now that we're dealing with, obviously, with this IGA, with ramp projects, that we're not going to necessarily advance any commitments at this point. There's really no funding for this other than right-of-way preservation. So just to let you know, we are engaged and we'll keep you apprised. Last item, the DIA Tower Pena ramp. Again, small letters, ramp. Several of you attended the meeting with Secretary LaHood in Washington, D.C. City manager has been conducting meetings with DIA, FAA in the last few weeks since we returned. We believe progress is being made. I think the message was received back from Washington, D.C. down to the local FAA people. The renewed efforts of the aviation manager, Kim Day, have been very helpful as well. So we're continuing to work on that. One thing that you will be seeing here potentially very shortly is that we have been talking with E470. As a reminder, they've committed to fund the project, and they want to get this off their books. So we're negotiating an amendment to that IGA with them where they could actually give us money for design right now. We could proceed at our own risk, and then they would not be on the hook if we have to redesign the project. They would also be able then to commit the construction cost for it once we get that final design number, which really does help them out for their finances and their auditors. So before I take questions, again, just 3 items we were hoping for tonight is, number 1, to have the authorizing of the mayor to sign the 2 letters for the ramp projects, possibly recommend a specific station name for 72nd in Colorado, if you have any feedback on that. And then lastly is a station typology based on the options that were presented.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with the list that I've got going. Councilwoman Carson. Nope, your light's on. I did cancel it. I can only cancel it to the last one. It won't let me cancel the last one. Councilman Douglas.
Yes, thank you, Jim. On that I-70 widening to be determined on as far as is there going to be any revenue sharing with that? If they decide to put a a designated HOV lane down the middle or something like that?
Oh, with I-270?
Yeah.
Well, the details have not been worked out yet. We're hoping that there would be some, I guess, off-system improvements that are related to that we'd be able to capitalize on as part of that revenue.
Okay.
There have not been a whole lot of details developed at this point.
All right. And then as far as that station, I know certain designs, and we saw the one that's going to go up there in Westminster. I know we had talked about that. And the other map, yeah, this one right here. I see there's like the trailhead connection there, and there's an underpass for pedestrian underneath the tracks, right there. Now, could that be something, they have the same design they have in Westminster to go there? I mean, I know the other one was in conjunction with the entering and exiting of the train platform, which is up above there, and the trailhead and underneath the pedestrian, because I don't see, as far as the illustration goes, I know we were going to tie a lot of things into there as far as maybe neighborhood parts and maybe some sort of place where people could live nearby, and this is just a station. It has nothing to do with anything else, right? As far as introducing, building out that little golden triangle there?
No, not directly. I mean,
Okay.
ultimately, there will be transit-oriented development around it. But let me try to clarify what RTD has been telling us. This drawing is right out of the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement that they received approval for a couple of years ago. They are trying to value engineer this thing as much as they can. They've already done single track some places. They've tried to cut down on parking. We identified this pedestrian underpass as one of the base system improvements when we first started talking with RTD staff, but now it's something that they're trying to discuss, maybe negotiating away or considering it a betterment, as they call it. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at in terms of things that we can put into the project that can count towards our local match.
I see.
We do have some Dr. Cog funding, TIP funding for some transportation improvements. There will be some use tax generated that we may be able to rebate, but there may be some actual capital improvements that we have to come out of the general fund to put into this. And so that's definitely on the table.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no other questions or comments, we'll get right to the letters. Is there a motion? Mr. McEldowney.
I would move to approve the authoring of the letters in support of the ramp projects as outlined by Deputy City Manager with the mayor's signature.
Mr. Bullock.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to allow the mayor to sign 2 letters. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. Does anybody have any comments on the station naming at this time, or do you want time to think about it and get back with staff? I would agree.
And time to think about the design of the 4 stations, too.
Yeah, I agree. So, is that good enough for you? I think we need some time to mull over the station design as well as naming.
Okay.
Mr. Bullock?
It's kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Douglas said when we went to the Westminster meeting and saw their station. Because this station is going to be a gateway to our city coming off of 72nd and I-76 and everything, and people will see it from I-76, and I was thinking something a little bit grander, but then it's detracted by the fact that they aren't planning on going away. So we could have a nice, pretty grand station with this gravel pit right behind it that isn't contributing to it one bit. But were you at that? You were at the Westminster AdCog meeting, weren't you, when they did that presentation on the 72nd Avenue station?
I was not, but I've seen it before.
Okay. It's just the fact that in connecting with the neighborhoods to make them pedestrian-friendly with the lighting and sidewalks, curbs, and gutters, to get access to this station by being able to walk should be one of our main considerations. because we have a lot of people in those neighborhoods that live close enough that walking is going to be the way they get it. They aren't going to jump in the car and drive over there and park. They're going to walk to the station, and we should make sure that any access has a pedestrian bridge or an underpass that is safe and looks good for the pedestrians to be able to get there also.
Mr. McEldowney.
Sorry, just piggybacking on Mr. Bullock's comments, we obviously talked about the second vehicle access, but I'm absolutely in agreement with Mr. Bullock that if the opportunity exists, or we should at least make note to look at additional pedestrian access. Pedestrian bridges, I mean, aren't nearly the cost of an automotive access. So if we could look at what the plan might look like to accommodate pedestrian access at the logical waypoints based on the road network, if that makes sense.
If I may add a little bit here. Let me get there. This brown line that runs across here, that is a pedestrian bridge that's proposed as part of the project. Again, it could be value engineered out, but right now it's in the project as being a bridge coming into the project. And then anything that we came up with down here at the other access would have to absolutely include pedestrian access.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no one else, thank you for the presentation. And we'll move on with the agenda. You got everything you need? Mr. McBrew?
I just had an item under administrative council business.
I'm not there yet. You're just trying to
I
get ahead of me.
understand.
Next item on the agenda will be administrative council business. And I'm going to start with Mr. McBroom.
We would like to request that council take an action to update the start meeting of the May 6th meeting to 5:30 to provide for an executive session for the purpose of instructing negotiators relative to an economic development project.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock.
Move to approve the moving of the meeting to 5:30 on May 6th.
Thank you. Mr. McEldowney. Second. I have a motion and a second to move the May 6th meeting from 6:30 to 5:30 p.m. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. That motion is carried. Now, anyone else for additional administrative council business? Mr. Douglas, you flashed. Didn't stay on, but you flashed.
Thanks. My button's kind of messed up over here.
We'll get that fixed if someone will take note that the button needs fixed. He
You gotta
flashes all the time, and I barely caught it this time.
I got to push it really hard for it to stick. One thing, if we can get an update on Xcel Energy franchise agreement. I know we talked about it last year and where that's at. Because of the ballot measure, what went through, because I didn't hear anything being, final which way, if they were contesting it.
The City Council did approve the franchise agreement last year, and then last November, the vote for the franchise did pass.
Mm-hmm.
We can package that information up and include it in an upcoming city manager update.
Okay. And the other thing is, I know we're going to have some things on the ballot for citizens to weigh in on, and of course, it's going to come at a cost. If we could looking at ways to give back to community, maybe looking at like some renewable energy here, because since we have open land, we like some small solar farms or something like that. And the other thing I just wanted to find out, so I know we, as far as the bond property, making sure that we do have the minimum rights, they were not sold. I know that was stated that was one of the reasons why we bought the property is it came with the mineral rights.
No, part of the agreement was the bonds reserve the mineral rights. We have a surface right agreement to make sure that any mineral operations that involve those mineral rights will not impact our surface rights. They'd have to do diagonal drilling or something of that nature to avoid any damage to our surface rights.
Oh, I thought I was under assumption that we were buying a property because we had the rights to it, mineral rights.
No,
on the
from
property.
day one, the mineral rights were being reserved, but the big issue was we needed a surface rights agreement to protect our surface right use of the property, and we got that as part of the closing.
Okay, I'm surprised at that. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else have any administrative council business? I do. I wanted to make it a point because of the weather tonight, and with 2 storms ago, a person died on Highway 2, another person died on Highway 2. I think that's 34 or 36 in the last 2 years that have died on that stretch of Highway 2 between 80th and 120th. The last storm that we had, several vehicles in the ditch again, one on its roof. I know I need to say I left my cell phone at home tonight, which is kind of nice because I'm not getting disturbed during the meeting. However, Mr. McBroom, you live up that way. Please pay attention to what Highway 2 looks like this evening, because if it doesn't look like it should look, I would respectfully ask you to call the police department and complain to the state so that we can get some maintenance on that road, especially during these storms, because I don't want to see any more of our residents in the ditch or killed because of lack of maintenance. Okay, moving on. Reports. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, we had quite a lengthy city manager report. In the interest of time and getting folks out of here due to the weather, I won't review everything. It's loaded with updates, so I would ask you to review it and contact me if you have any questions about the information in it.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney.
I just want to thank the members of the city, as well as the city council and staff, for the numerous inquiries that have been made regarding my wife's health condition. I want to pleased to advise you that the findings are still inconclusive as far as her condition is concerned. She has a mass in her abdomen, but it has not been determined to be malignant. That's the good news. And every test they've made so far has indicated that it is not a malignancy. So we're still in an inconclusive state, but the news, I think, is quite positive. But thank you for all the inquiries and the cards and the gift that I got from the city regarding acknowledgement of her condition. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now for my reports, I'd like to start off with some condolences. I just found out this last week that our former chief, Chuck Saunier, had lost his father. I wasn't aware of it. I don't know if this council was aware of it, but after having it brought to my attention, he did serve this community for a long time, and he did serve this community as the acting chief of police for a year, and it was a tough year with a lot of police activity taking place. I believe we had 6 homicides, which is 5 higher than our average. So I know he had dealt with a lot of situations for us, and I don't want to neglect the fact that he's not here with us right now. I think we still need to offer him those condolences, and I've asked the city manager to prepare a card for the council to be able to sign, or from the council, and whether it be a fruit basket or something, just to say, you know what, I know he's on medical leave right now, but that doesn't change the fact of what he did for this community for 20 plus years. So I want to treat him like we would treat any other city employee when it comes to the loss of his father. So I wanted that to be well known to the council and I wished I would have recalled that when I had my moment of silence. So keep him and his family in your prayers. Many of us attended the Metro North Development Breakfast. I had an airport coordinating committee, bus tour of the North Line, and Councilman Benson also attended that bus tour. I went to Rotary. I met with Aaron Mooney and the city manager. I met with Pastor Ryan from the Good News Church. I met with Mike Cowley and some of the staff. Several of us attended the Adams County 4-H dinner. Went to Rotary again. Attended the Airport Consultation Committee meeting. Friday, I participated in an event called Tortillas for Tepeyac, which is for the Clinica de Tepeyac, I guess is how you pronounce it. I was supposed to compete against Mayor Hogan from Aurora. I won by default because he didn't show up. But I have to tell you, I did make a pretty darn good tortilla. I was actually pretty happy with the way it turned out. Mr. Teeter came and was there to support me, as was my family. It was a nice event. And then several of us, well, not several of us, me and Steve and our wives attended the Metro Mayor's Commissioners Youth Award Banquet over at Riverdale Friday night. And then this morning, I met with Commissioner Chaz Tedesco and Steve Hogan. And tomorrow we will have another Airport Consultation Committee, or Coordinating Committee meeting. There's so many airport meetings that I get those two confused, consultation and coordinating. But tomorrow is an Airport Coordinating Committee meeting, which includes all 6 jurisdictions as well as Denver. The Consultation Committee is just the 3 representatives from Adams County and the 3 representatives from Denver. But we are making some headway. Sometimes it feels like we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but hopefully we're gaining. With that said, I would like to tell everybody to be careful going home. The roads are probably slick by now. Be safe out there. I don't want to encourage any more Highway 2 issues than we have to. Mr. Bullock, before I close the meeting?
And Ms. Carson also has some comment.
Okay.
At the Metro Mayor's Youth...
Turn your microphone on, please.
At the Metro Mayor's Youth Commission meeting, did any one of our Commerce City kids, were they...
selected to move forward?
Yes.
No, the one that was selected to move forward, they only picked one out of all of the Adams County, and that one person that was selected was from Brighton this year. However, all of our kids did show up, and myself and Mr. Douglas represented them well, and we had a nice banquet for them, and we'll move on to the state level.
Ms. Carson.
Councilwoman Carson.
I just wanted to congratulate Michelle Halstead and her husband Nick on the birth of their baby girl.
Absolutely, good call.
Oh, yes. Congratulations.
Anybody else? Mr. McInerney?
Just real quickly, I wanted to announce that the 27J Capital Facility Fee Foundation, which we've talked about previously, proud to announce that Adams County has officially been added as a municipal board, or a member of the board now. Chaz Tedesco will be sitting on the 27J Capital Facility Fee Foundation on behalf of the commissioners. Attended his first meeting with us on Friday, where we modified or approved the bylaw modification to allow Adams County to sit in a voting capacity. They had been ex officio and had not participated in the entire time that I've been on that board, which has been most of my time on council. So really good to see the commissioners support. The board and district representation had met with the commissioners. It's been about a month and a half ago now to pitch the idea. Great support. So just good to have another partner in the mix, and hopefully we'll see them help secure additional contributions from our building community for our schools. Thanks.
Mr. Douglas.
Yes, just a reminder, just let everybody know that you can get your E470 passes now up at the new King Soopers. Take your old transponders and turn them in and get the new chips for your window. Doesn't cost anything, so that's nice. That's available.
Good, thanks for the heads up. If there's nothing further to come before this council this evening, we are adjourned. and be safe going home. A nice banquet for them, and we'll move on to the state level.